Hello and welcome to the Fisherman's Post Saltwater Podcast. This episode is titled Fall Artificials from the Pier. And we're going to be featuring Bill Davis, who spends most of his pier fishing time off of Johnnie Mercers Pier in Wrightsville Beach. And we're going to set the stage for what defines fall. And then he's going to walk me through several artificial choices, how to implement them, and the species that they will work on. So we got a lot to cover. My name is Gary Hurley of Fisherman's Post. Fisherman's Post has been serving the saltwater fishing community since 2003. We've been offering fishing reports, fishing information, fishing tournaments, and fishing schools. And now the growing in popularity Fisherman's Post Saltwater Podcast series, and is in this podcast series that we reach out to our captain and guide friends from up and down the North Carolina coast to ask them to share with us their insights, their knowledge on how to catch more fish more often, albeit the true goal of not just catching more fish, but getting you and your family and your friends out on the water, spending more time together more often. I'm joined in this podcast venture with my podcast partner, Billy Thorpe of Thorpe Creative. Billy, good to be talking to you again, man.
Gary, good to see you, man. It's always a pleasure to be here on the Fisherman's Post podcast. Always chopping it up before the show and afterward with you, so super fun, man. Look forward to the conversation with Bill.
Yeah, man, this is a conversation long in the works. Been looking forward to talk to him about pier fishing. Certainly have an affection for the pier culture, the pier dynamic, and want to learn more about it from Bill. But before we do that, we got some stuff to cover, don't we?
Yeah, man, we got some stuff to cover, and the first thing we want to do is give a shout out to our sponsors. I got a quick message from Marine Warehouse. We'll be right back.
At Marine Warehouse, we have everything. We have new boats, we have parts, we have accessories, new trailers, we have a complete service department with highly trained technicians. Anything you need to get out on the water, we have it.
At Marine Warehouse Center, as we've grown over the last few years, now have a large section of marine supplies from start to finish for all your boating needs.
What I love about this region is to be able to get out on the water, and also we love to be able to get you out on the water.
The best part of working at Marine Warehouse is being able to get involved with the customers and share a love for the water.
Boom, and that they do, Gary. Marine Warehouse loves the water, and Terrell loves working at Marine Warehouse. But he really loves telling jokes, I bet. And I hope he has one.
He does.
It's been a while since I've heard one, so I hope he has one.
He does, and unfortunately, it is not his best effort. Although I'm a little bit harder on his efforts than you are, so maybe you'll like it.
All right.
I know he does well with parts, service, and sales. But fish jokes, you tell me. Here we go. Why did the fish cross the road?
I don't know.
To get to the other tide. I know. It's like he's not even trying. It's like he made it up while he was talking to me on the phone.
Yeah.
He just made it up.
Right? No, there's no way he looked that one up on Google. Not a chance. Oh, man. Too much fun. Good job, Terrell. By the way, go by and see Marine Warehouse and make sure you hook Terrell up with some new jokes. And when you're done with Marine Warehouse, head up to Raleigh Apex Hitch here, RA Hitch. Hitches, trailers, bike racks, and so much more. Chris and his team do a fantastic job. And be sure to mention Gary and I and say, hey, those Fish Post dudes told me that you would save me $20 if I came up there and hung out with you and bought some product. So see if you can get free $20. They might or might not give it to you. I don't know, but tell them the Fisherman's Post guys sent you, and you'll get some kind of favor. I mean, maybe a lollipop or something. I don't know. We'll see.
I'm going to use that deal. I'm going to buy a luggage carrier for the top of my wife's car.
You know what, Gary?
I'm going to try to get $20 off.
I'm going to hold you to it, man. I think I was just editing a show the other day, and I heard something about this luggage rack. Like,
yeah,
when's
it's
this going to
real.
happen? It's going to happen?
We've got 3 kids playing travel soccer, man. We are getting a luggage rack from RA Hitch.
I don't think a luggage rack is going to handle those boys' stuff, all right? Not with sports gear and all that. Anyway, let's move on to fishing, shall we? Or some other types of fishing stuff, I should say, which would be a fish photo. I got one if you want to see it. All right, we got Mark Ostrowski with a 5.2-pound false albacore that was hooked on a gotcha plug while fishing off of Johnnie Mercers Pier. That's a good-looking albacore, and love Johnnie Mercers. Great place to go fishing. I do miss it, fishing off that pier.
Yeah, man. Again, the Pier culture, all of it is tied together, and it's an experience. It's an adventure. And albacore is probably going to be, I can't imagine it's not one of the species that Bill talks with us about. And then we have another sponsor right before we move on. Is that correct?
Yeah, right before we move on. And really quickly, if you want to sponsor the show, feel free to reach out. Reach out to me, Billy@fishermanspost.com. And if you want to support Gary and I as creators, you can do that by going to buymeacoffee.com. But last but not least, we got a new sponsor, Manscaped. So go to manscaped.com, use promo code FISHPOST, save 20% off, and get free shipping. They have challenged us to see if we could sell several items for them. And they're like, you got a bunch of dudes, you got a bunch of hairy dudes that need our manscaping products. So if you need to replace that product or razor or whatever you got going on, they get a ton of different products.
Buy one if you just need to start that game. If you need to start that game and not replace that game.
Yeah, right. There's probably some dudes that are like, oh, I probably could shave.
I mean, the jokes are just too ripe. I'm still going to stay away from them. But I do, Billy, I do have the Manscaped challenge for you.
All right. I'm ready.
And the Manscaped challenge is this. I'm going to list 3 products. 2 are actual Manscaped products that you can purchase online. 1
right.
I made up. I just made it up. Are you ready?
I'm ready. So
Now, they're similar.
I'm trying to call out the one that you made up, right?
Yeah. 2 are real. 1 is made up. You tell me which one's made up.
All right.
We have the Crop Preserver, the Crop Duster, the Crop Reviver.
I hope this one is real, but I'm going to say Crop Duster is fake.
Man, you know your Manscaped. You are a good spokesman for Manscaped. You already know their products. That is the one I made up.
All right. See, I take care of my sponsors and other products. They have a huge product list. I don't know them all. But anyway, oh, man, that's the Crop Duster. I wish that was true. Like, that'd be so much fun. Anyway.
All right. So, Billy, as I'm talking to Bill, and we're talking about Johnnie Mercer's Pier, with which you are familiar and you have fished from, and that's saying something because you haven't fished from many places.
That's right.
I need you to be paying attention for Billy's best takeaway.
You got it, Gary. Got my notebook ready. Turn it
All
over.
right,
to
I'm
you
going
guys.
to talk with Bill now. So, hello, Bill Davis, representing, I guess, unofficially Johnnie Mercer's Pier. Welcome to the program, Bill. Pleasure to have you here talking.
Thank you for having me, Gary.
Yeah, man. Good to talk to you. We're going to talk about fall artificials from the pier. We're going to set the stage on when. We're going to talk about the different artificial choices that you like to implement. But as is tradition on the Fisherman's Post podcast, there are 2 questions before we begin the main event. Are you ready for your 2 questions, Mr. Davis?
Sure, absolutely.
Question number 1. Why should we listen to anything you have to say about throwing artificials from the pier in the fall season?
Good question. I've been fishing for over 50 years, but seriously been fishing for more than 40 when I started working at a bait and tackle shop when I was about 14 years old. Shortly after that, I started working on the boats, head boats, charter boats, learned a lot from those folks. Grew up at the Jersey Shore fishing on the Seaside Heights fishing pier, which is an old wooden pier. Did that for years prior to getting my 100 gross ton captain's license, which now at a much later years in my fishing career, I've been bumped down to a 50 gross ton master's license, but still out on the ocean quite often. More importantly, talking about fishing piers, the last 10 years, I've really got into the fishing pier scene. Something new, something fun, definitely something different, a lot less expensive. And I learned a lot from a lot of guys on Johnnie Mercers, and I'm sure plenty of other piers that are masters at it. So last 10 years have been a great education to me. I'm a quick learner, good listener, and I hope to share some of that information with all of you.
Man, that is a fantastic answer, and I am ready to proceed. But as is tradition, question number 2 is a non-fishing related question. And while I believe we're going to talk about plugging from the pier, your questions have to do with plugging a watermelon. Are you ready for questions about plugging a watermelon?
I'll try.
All right. I got 3 true false for you. So you got a 50% chance with any of them. True false.
Okay.
A watermelon is both a fruit and a vegetable.
I am at a total disadvantage since I do not like watermelon. I'm going to say it's only a fruit.
Apparently, and I didn't know this before Googling, it is both a fruit and a vegetable.
Yeah.
Question number 2. Watermelons are over 94% water.
Okay, that's a trick question, but I'm going to go with yes, water. Mostly water.
That would be false, 92%. Yeah, kind of. True, false. Heaviest watermelon to date weighed over 350 pounds.
Oh, I got to go with true. Why not?
Yeah, and you're right. You got this one right. You finished strong.
Hey,
But
I
so
hope
it
I
is
go fishing
true,
better.
over 350 pounds. But I'm sure our guests are ready for this to be done and to be talking about pier fishing in the fall, throwing artificials, lots to cover. And I think as we decided, like, let's set the stage for when we're talking about. So when you talk about the fall season from the pier, how do you define that fall season?
We start to define it not necessarily by a month, but when the air starts getting cooler, the water starts to get a little cooler, and the bait fish start to school up and move closer to the beach. That's when we see the predator fish starting to follow them, and that's when the actions starts to happen on the pier.
And so is there typically any kind of water temperature that you see kicks that off? Is it, any kind of roughly, I know we don't go by months. I mean, you even told me something about how it was off last year, but any other indicators for when we can say, hey man, now it's right for this information Bill Davis is going to share?
Well, you know what's going to happen, starting in late September, but it's different for different species, and different species prefer different water temperatures. Like we know that the king mackerels start to move a little further offshore as it drops into the mid to lower 60s. But yet, as I said to you earlier, it's been a little crazy. We had actually caught Spanish mackerel, which should leave before the kings. They were around till after Thanksgiving. So typically, though, unless you get some big major storm, the fall season starts sometime around the mid to the end of September, and it can go strong right to about Thanksgiving.
All right. So I believe we decided like we are going to approach this by going from artificial to artificial to artificial, and then sort of talking about techniques and species likely to work on. What's our first bait we're going to talk about?
Well, before we talk about bait, I want to just mention two things. Whether you're using monofilament or you're using monofilament or any other type of line, you're going to need to use a leader material, and we really didn't speak a lot about that. So typically, if you're going to tie, you're going to be running a line to your spool at about 30-pound test. You're going to want to run a shock leader or some type of leader between 20 and 30-pound test for most of these species we're talking about, unless we're getting to the real toothy critters like the king mackerel.
And then how long do you like that leader to be? How long of a piece of leader? I
like to run about a 2-foot leader at the most. That's what some guys like a little shorter. Some guys like to use a little piece of metal, whether you use 7-strand metal, but most people will use just monofilament. And
then what would be your general purpose rod of choice for throwing some of these artificials we're going to talk about?
Well, 6 to 7 foot for most of them, and with a light action tip. But some of the larger species that we may be talking about here could be like tarpon, cobia, or king mackerel. You're going to want to use about an 8 to 9 foot rod with a pretty stiff tip.
All right. And do you have a preference between braid or mono on your reels?
On most of my rods, I use braid on reels with a piece of mono. I like to use Mamoy as for my leader material. It's a little harder, a little stiffer, and it doesn't break as easy.
Okay, I follow that, man. Then what is going to be our first artificial that you hold up and explain to me the application?
Well, one of these, and one of the most everybody knows it by is a gotcha plug. And hopefully you can see the gotcha plug here if I need to hold a little higher. The gotcha plug that I'm showing you is probably the standard color that most guys use, which is the white gotcha. And the plug is used for a multitude of species: bluefish, Spanish mackerel, pompano. You showed that false albacore that Mark caught earlier. That slide that was caught on a gotcha plug. Maybe not necessarily the all white, but the all white should be in everybody's tackle box. And some of the
So
species, other species that I didn't mention, well, I did mention. Yeah, I'm sorry. Sorry, Gary. Go ahead.
no, man, I was just gonna sort of question a little bit more about the white gotcha plug. So all white should be in everyone's bag, and I think most of us have maybe had the experience, whether it's the Pier tackle shop or just any tackle shop, and seeing what seems to be infinite choices of gotcha plugs. Like, what do you recommend, man? Like, how many different options? Certainly, we don't want everything. We can't afford everything. We don't want to carry everything. But if you were to advise someone who's sort of getting into it, they want to be efficient, and they're listening to you, and they go, "Okay, Bill Davis, I'll have an all white in there, but give me two or three other of your top choices to have just in case."
Yeah. Some of the other popular ones that I see often up on the pier is you're going to want to have a silver and a gold color, like a silver chrome or a gold looking brass color. That too is very popular. But as far as the white goes, a lot of the fishermen like to have a different color head on it, whether it's a green, red, yellow, or blue. Blue's very, very common as well. But I realize, I probably do have about 40 in my tackle box that I carry with me. But mostly I always revert back to white with some flavor of different color head on it. Can't tell you why one day yellow works better than red, but if I'm seeing other anglers catch more than me, or I'm not getting as many strikes as they are, I'm going to switch over. The other gotcha plug I was going to tell you about, and this is kind of a little bit of mystery to me, is actually the pink gotcha. And for whatever reason, and I tried to read up on this and I come up with a partial answer, I think you should also have a pink gotcha plug in your box. Pompano seem to really like pink. And the closest thing I found to this is it said that reading about Pompano is that sand crabs, when they lay their eggs, they're like an orangish pink in color, and Pompano like to feed on that. And so maybe in mass, I mean, certainly that gotcha plug looks a lot bigger than what a sand crab egg would look like, but that seems to be the only correlation that I could come up with. But definitely, as far as the gotcha plug goes, you got to have an all white in your box. That's the most popular.
All right. So I too am a believer in the power of the gotcha plug and the versatility of the gotcha plug. So I want to stay on gotcha plugs a little bit longer. And you already gave a list of species, but I want to sort of go back through and circle around and just, there might be some redundancy here, but I want to sort of hear your thoughts on different ones. So if I'm
Sure.
going out in the fall with the intention of catching Spanish mackerel, right? Still there?
I'm still
Then,
there.
then how far, where on the pier do you suggest I go towards the end, towards the breakers? And then, how would you advise me to do my cast and retrieve?
Well, interesting thing, and that's a good question about the Spanish mackerel, especially in the fall, is you'll start to see them pushing bait. And when you start to see whether it's a glass minnow or small mullet starting to come to the surface and pop to the surface, you need to move with them. You may be starting out in the shallow, up almost in the suds, and before the end of the day, you could be out at the end of the tee on the pier, following the Spanish where they're running. There's no real rhyme or reason where they're going to be on the pier, but it could be the full length of the 1,000-foot Johnnie Mercer piers where you'll be fishing for them. You could be right in the suds.
And when they are biting, are they usually biting on one side of the pier or the other? How does that typically play out?
Well, normally with the fish now migrating from the north heading south, so you're going to want to cut them off fishing on the north side. It is true that sometimes we'll see them coming in, and they don't always go straight through the pier. As they get closer to pier, they start to move east to go up and around it. I guess it just looks like a big old brick wall in front of them, and it's not always the case. Sometimes they go right through, but yeah, you're going to want to move with the fish.
And if I'm seeing them push bait, then of course I'm going to target that action. If I'm not seeing them push bait, I'm still going to blind cast. I still have a reasonable chance just working that gotcha plug to hook. So if I were out there and saying, "Hey man, what's the best way to give this thing its action that you think works best on a Spanish?" What are you telling me? Cast it out far, flip the bail and letting it sink, keeping it on the surface. Like, how would you coach me?
Well, I think that's a great question as well. And I'll tell you what, again, if I'm seeing somebody catching them and I'm not, I'm watching what they're doing. If nobody's catching them, you got to explore and experiment. Not only do you got to explore maybe with the color of the gotcha plug you're using, but you also got to explore the technique. And that's the nice thing also about the gotcha plug. Anyone coming up on the pier the first day can use a gotcha plug, and they can be effective with it. So you may want to try to just retrieve it straight in, slow. There could be an upward jigging motion, really fast, getting the plug to whip back and forth in the water. You could drop it down really deep. I seen it almost folks looking like a bucktail. Watched the lady last year. Nobody was catching Spanish or blues. A lady about halfway down the pier, and she was just doing like a rhythm of just 2 jigs, letting it slide back down into the water column. 2 more jigs, let it slide back down in the water column. She was hooking up with Spanish and blues more so than anyone else. So I went over roughly into her area, not invading her space, and I started doing the same thing, and I started catching them. Before long, it looked like an orchestra of everybody effectively doing the same thing, and then it just shut off. Then all of a sudden, somebody else was catching them with the traditional way of jigging a plug. So you just gotta go with the flow of what's working at that time.
So that would be blues and Spanish. How would you advise me any differently, whether it's where on the pier or the action, if I had a pink gotcha plug and was thinking, man, I've been told this might catch me a pompano?
Okay, if I was fishing pompano, and they do run in schools, and most of the time they're running a little closer to the surf line because that is where they feed on these crabs that we spoke of. If we weren't seeing schools of pompano, or a number of them weren't getting caught, I do think that your success would happen closer in the surf. And again, you could catch them on a gotcha plug, but if I'm using a gotcha plug, I probably would go with the pink. I've seen many more get caught with a pink gotcha plug, or something they call the electric chicken. It's yellow and pink, but those 2 colors are the colors that I see have been most successful. And I would be in closer to the beach, to the surf.
So beyond blues and Spanish and pompano, what else am I likely to hook with doing a cast and retrieve of a gotcha plug? Fall on the pier.
Yes. As far as, we talked about seeing fish pushing bait. A lot with the Atlantic bonito and the false albacore, real easy to spot. They would be, that would be a good opportunity to cast a gotcha plug to them. And my preference is to actually not cast in front of them, but always cast a little past them if I could, and bring the gotcha plug through them. I've had the most success hooking up with them at that point, that way. Other species with the gotcha plug, and I hate to use the word lizardfish, but lizardfish seem to like gotcha plugs real well. Little slimy things with the lizard-looking teeth, mean. Real slow jig seems to you end up catching those. But we've been catching trout. You can definitely catch flounder with them if you move them slow enough. That's the beauty about the gotcha plug. It's really versatile, and you can catch a lot of different species with them. There's been a couple guys that have actually caught smaller king mackerel, anything under 15 pounds with gotcha plugs. Problem is they normally get bit off because you're normally using monofilament, as your leader material. But we've had a couple kings caught with gotcha plugs.
And so I have a couple of follow-up questions just from our conversation.
Sure.
I'm going back a little bit. So
That's right.
It is my belief that, people want to do the right thing and people want to follow pier etiquette. They might just not know pier etiquette. So earlier you talked about the lady who had found a rhythm and you went, next to her without invading her space. What is protocol there if someone's actively casting? Like, how close can I get to them without being too close?
That's a fair question. Depends how well you know the person. I mean, if I'm there with my buddies, we could be shoulder to shoulder and we know how to work together, and whether we're casting or whether we're retrieving, who needs to retrieve faster, so we can try to keep the lines from being tangled. I would normally look at the angler that I'm going to be fishing near. If that person can't cast perfectly straight, they're a little offline, then that's the space I want to give them. If they're throwing more of an angle and they're off by 10 degrees, I don't want to be standing that close to them that we're just going to continue to tangle each other. If they can't, work in rhythm with me and the other folks on the other side of them, then I just want to give them more and more space. And most people recognize that. Even whether you're a regular or you're a newcomer, people recognize, different people's ability, and that's how I decide and judge how close I want to be to them. And I think a lot of people feel the same way.
And if I am in a situation where I'm shoulder to shoulder, if it's a hot bite, if there's running, and that's just the nature of it is, what tips do you have when you're working in close proximity to keep from tangling and messing up and keeping everyone actively fishing?
Again, assuming we're all anglers and we've done this before and we can
Yeah.
work in those conditions, we normally will cast in sequence. We try not both everyone to cast at exactly the same time, creating tangles, because I don't know the point of where their lure is going to hit the water. So I'll wait till their lure hits the water first and they start to retrieve. If in that case, then I will try to overcast them, cast past them, or I'll cast to the side of them, and I'll let them start to work their plug in. And then that's how we do it. So we're staggering our lines coming in and try to avoid. I mean, there are times when a guy will hook up with a bluefish, because typically if one bluefish gets hooked up, you'll see 3 or 4 more chase the one that's hooked, trying to steal what it considers is the bait from it. And I will cast right pretty much when I say on top of them, but I feel like I'm a pretty decent caster. I'll cast like right into that pack of wolves that's trying to get that bait from that other bluefish, and normally pick one off of what's chasing his lure. So again, it kind of goes back to the ability of who you're fishing with, and we do fish in like I say, staggering in a sequence. So, and if I'm getting in a situation where I'm fishing like that with a group of people who do know what they're doing, and you got 1 or 2 that just can't cast just a straight or not following that protocol, we normally know how to work around that person. So therefore, we're not getting tangled up with them, and we're not making them feel miserable. So we work with we'll call it a handicap.
Got it. And then I think this is my last question on the gotcha plug before we move forward. When you're tying that gotcha plug onto your leader, are you tying a loop knot? Or are you tying something with more integrity, something that might cinch down and hold it tight?
That's a preference. Some guys like to tie what they call a Rapala knot, which is a loop knot with an improved clinch knot, so it lets the lure have more action. And then other folks just like to tie an uni knot. And of course the third is one of the easiest to tie would be the improved clinch knot. I play it by ear depending on really the kind of rod I'm using. If I don't have a real loose rod tip, because my son got we'll call it the better of the 2 rods, I may put the Rapala knot on it so that I got a loop in my line and I get a lot more action. It really does depend. I don't have any one particular preference, and I think a lot of people feel that way. They may tie it just because of what's easy, but you got to tie it for the situation and conditions you're in. But they're the 3 most common knots.
Okay. And then I think this is my last question. If I said that was my last question, I lied. I think this is my last question. You have been on the pier. I'm asking, you have been on the pier where Bluefish Spanish or whatever it was wanted one color gotcha plug and only one color gotcha plug and nothing else would work. Can it really be that cut and dry on certain days?
That's a stretch. But I do think
Okay.
I do think that because you could tempt them to do a reaction bite if they're you're upset with what you're presenting in front of them. But there's been days that you just got to shake your head and wonder, why are they only hitting white with a green head? There's no good reason for it, but there's something about the watercolor, the air conditions. I don't know what it is. There is those days, and that's normally the day that I don't have that plug.
All right. Well, I think we've done due diligence with gotcha plugs. I'm eager to see what's next on your list of artificials to feature.
Well, so I like to share, kind of a couple more that are pretty easy to use that are very common on the pier as well. This is a Sting Silver. Again, very common. The beautiful thing about the Sting Silver, this particular one happens to be 2 ounce. You can cast these far. And so when you're dealing with whether, again, it's blue, Spanish, they're far away from the pier, they're not moving real close, false albacore, Atlantic bonito, that's typically the 4 species of fish I'm talking about. You can see them out there blitzing, but you just can't reach them. The gotcha plug comes in 3 different sizes: 1/2 ounce, 3/4 ounce, 1 ounce. The Sting Silver comes in 1 ounce, 2 ounce, and a 3 ounce. And if I can cast my gotcha plug with the same rod, the same pound test, same leader, let's just say I can cast, I'm just making this up, but 100 feet. I could probably take that Sting Silver and cast it 200 feet, twice as far. So the Sting Silver is, again, a very common, very popular. You could buy it almost anywhere. There's some epoxy similar in a little different color, very much like the Sting Silver. They're very common, and you should have a box absolutely for the 4 species that I mentioned. And they too will also work real well with a king mackerel if one hits it. So.
All right, so it looks like we're gonna have another color conversation. If you have one Sting Silver and only one Sting Silver, that is blank, and then the follow-up is, and then if you were to have 2 or 3 other color options at your disposal, those color options would be blank.
Well, if you're going to have anything other than silver itself, I would definitely say pink, green, and blue. They do make a yellow and they make an orange, but by far, and this is really dictated by watercolor. If the water is a little more cloudier, you're going to want to use the blue or the green. If the water's somewhat clear, you're going to want to use the silver or the pink. And that's a matter of fact. I see those colors, they'll outproduce based on the watercolor itself.
And the action,
the clearer the water. Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's all right, man. So the action on the Sting Silver is reel it in as fast as I can, or is that another lure where you might need to try some different rhythms?
Well, you're certainly not going to jig it up and down. That's for certain. Let it bounce off the bottom. But it could be a little slower retrieve, or it could be a super fast retrieve. Depends how fast you see the fish are swimming. I sometimes can't keep up with, especially the false albacore and Atlantic bonito. They're just flying through the water. You're going to have to crank it. Just to keep up with them, you're going to have to really, put some muscle into getting that lure moving fast. If you're not really seeing them, but they're out there, they've been circling, but they're not pushing bait right now, you could slow down your retrieve a little bit and get them to take a look at it in case they're passing through. But there's certainly no jigging up and down necessarily. I'm sure people have caught fish doing that, but that traditionally hasn't produced. So it's really, in this case, it's either going to be a real fast retrieve, a medium retrieve, or just a slower retrieve to get deeper into the water column.
All right. Any more thoughts on the Sting Silver before I ask you what's next on the display?
No, that's pretty so. Wanted to show you a couple Pompano jigs, and cool. These two, I don't know if you can see these, but these are Pompano jigs, and they're store bought. Gentleman by the name of Pompano Richard, he came up with these designs of these jigs. He's somewhere in Florida, and they work real well. We're just starting to see these jigs in North Carolina. I actually had to call and order them from them. The only other place that had them was in the Outer Banks, and unfortunately they were out of stock. I just started seeing them the last couple of years. It took me about a year to find them where they're at, and they're very similar in a way of any other jig head. They're shaped a little differently, kind of half crescent shaped, and they have a teaser on them, and they just seem to work real well. So this fellow Richard seems to have found the magic for him. I know he really enjoys pompano fishing down in Florida. He's been very successful at it, and looking at readings about him in some of the articles. And I hope that more tackle shops will consider having these on their shelves, because they do produce. They work real well. I'm not sure I can't say they work better than the gotcha plug, because we just don't see them up here that much. But I know for me, they worked very well last year.
And it's just a single rig. It's not like a 2-hook rig.
It is a 2-hook rig. It's I could try to take one out of the pack, but it tends to get tangled up. So it's a jig head. It's like a crescent-shaped jig head, and below it is a little teaser. So when you're jigging this through the water, and this one happens to be green, as you're jigging this through the water, the teaser is going in a counter action motion that the jig head is. And you do jig this one pretty slow. It's not a really fast retrieve. You don't put any bait on it. But I'm really liking it. This will only be my second year using it. I found it last year, toward the end of the season, and I was scoring really well with it. I actually doing better on this than other people who were using the gotcha plug. So this is really, again, my only second year, and I wish I would have found it earlier because I think I missed a lot of opportunity with some, decent pompano. But that's a jig head. I haven't caught any other fish on it. I can't tell you why, but it could have just been in a water column I was fishing with about the half a dozen times that I've used it. But it is called the Pompano catcher, and you can look that up online. Like I said, there's one Outer Banks tackle shop that was selling them, but they were out of stock.
And with that jig head construction, does that mean I'm bouncing it off the bottom? Does that mean I'm doing a more kind of like jig head bounce back to the pier?
No, you're exactly right. In a way it's designed. You are bouncing it off the bottom. It'll be sitting on the bottom like this, so the hook won't be down where it can dig in. The hook is facing up, and as you're jigging it, this teaser will be above it, and it's just kind of flirting with it. So the fish that I caught last year, I would say a majority of them were caught on the teaser. And I know one trip I went out, I think I had 22 pompano. Didn't keep them all because some of them were small. But I would say out of the 22, 15, roughly about 15 were caught on that teaser. And nice little jig. And I've only had luck. I got to tell you, I've really only had luck with the pink. Caught the majority of fish, but I got the green because of especially when you're in close to the surf, the water's a little more turbulent, a little darker. But I didn't do that well with the green, so the pink was definitely my favorite.
Man, I like that. I like this pompano catcher. Anything else? I mean, I didn't check with you before the show started, so I don't want to keep asking, but I want to keep asking. What else might you have to share with us?
As far as I did want to talk a little bit about trout, and this is also good for flounder. Just a regular jig head, and this particular color is forget something chicken. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. But it's something chicken is the color, and this is probably one of my favorite trout jig heads that I use off the pier. Obviously you can use this off the surf too. And as far as jig head go, they do come in different colors. I have not found anyone that really, personally, I haven't found anyone that works better, whether I'm using white, red, or yellow. But by far, I've been doing real well with this. I'm sorry, Gary, I can't remember the name of it, but it's something chicken. And this particular jig head this particular artificial has been my favorite plastic. There's plenty of other colors out there that work. I hear talk about new penny color, and there's like a white speckle color. There's so many different colors out there. Again, this could be a preference. It could be what works off Johnnie Mercer, but may not work off one of the other piers. But this is definitely a trout catcher if you're using artificials, and a few other trout catchers, and these are also good for red drum off the pier, which we haven't talked about until now, is mirror lures. And so there's all types of different color mirror lures. And again, the only thing I would say is if the darker the watercolor, especially maybe in toward the evening, you want to use darker mirror lure. And when it's lighter water, you can use the traditional red and white, and just all different color mirror lures. And as well as mirror lures go, there's some that are deep divers, there's some that are surface floaters, some that are mid-range column. You just have to know where you want to fish them and where you use them. If I'm off the end of pier, I'm usually using more of a weighted one and want to get it down a little bit where the trout are at. If I'm in more shallow and I don't want to cook the bottom, I'm using one that's not so much a deep diver, but mid-water column mirror lure.
All right, I got a follow-up question. Follow-up question on the soft plastic. Do you remember the company that makes it? If you can't remember the color, do you know what company soft plastic you like for that paddle tail?
Let's give me a second. I'm going to cheat. Okay. Saltwater Assassin.
Okay.
And the chicken chain. So I had to cheat. Sorry. It's this color is a chicken on a chain, and it's Saltwater Assassin. And the Saltwater Assassin also makes other comment. There's all other kinds of plastics you can use, and I go through a lot of them. So I'm not saying this is the only one. It's just the one that I particularly like.
Man, this has been good. I'm glad that we got red drum into this conversation too. I know people are interested in red drum, excited about red drum. Anything else?
Well, with the red drum, which I was going to get to next anyway, my preference is really gulp if I'm going to use artificials off the pier. Different depends again on the size of the lead head. Use a 3-inch gulp, paddle tail, twisty tail. There's shad, there's mullet, there's crab, there's all different scents. There's shrimp. But I do like using gulp for drum off the pier when I'm doing artificials. Normally working them slow, and not only are they good for red drum, they're good for black drum as well, especially the shrimp and the crab scent.
You use scent much when you're trout fishing on those saltwater assassins? You believe in scent?
I do believe in scent, but I don't on this. Not when I'm using the saltwater assassin. I'm not using scent. It's mostly the gulp that I'm using, and I'm using a different scent there.
Well, Bill, I'm not sure. I mean, I will talk to you as long as you want to hold up stuff. I'm guessing we're getting towards the end, but that's only a guess.
Well,
If you've got more to share, then let's share.
Yeah, I do have a few more I want to share.
Right on.
I want to share a couple of these plugs here that we do use, and we're mostly using these for cobia. These happen to be homemade by some of the guys that are. I hope you see these guys that are fishing up on the pier. And besides being decorative and pretty, with a cobia, as you probably well know, it's like a cat putting a string in front of it. If you could tease them with one of these lures, these bucktails, they are going to attack. And so, going you theme being artificial, I just wanted to share with you that if we see a cobia on the surface, if you're a good caster and you can reach that fish and you can work the bucktail in front of it, there's a good chance that you're going to get it to strike. Can't always say it's a good chance you're going to get it to land, because they're certainly like a tiger by the tail, but that is certainly the bucktail of choice. I don't want to say up and down the East Coast, because there are others. There are different paddle tails. I know this is one of my son's favorite for cobia, but it normally swims like such. But there's a number of good bucktails that are out there for cobia.
And are you seeing cobia in the fall? My limited knowledge, I think of them as a spring fishery, but are you seeing them in the fall?
Both spring and fall. In the spring, they're migrating north to spawn, and in the fall they're heading back or heading out offshore. So we see them both. We did not have a good spring season on Johnnie Mercer Pier. I think they had a pretty decent season up in the Outer Banks. Not hearing too much about the southern piers this year doing well with cobia yet. So I'm hoping that it is going to be a fall fishery, but let's see.
All right. And then now where are we on the artificial list? Any other tricks?
Yeah, last ones I want to show you.
All right.
And here we're talking about throwing lures for big Spanish and or king mackerel. And there's a number of different lures out there that people like to use. There's Yazoris, there's there's rattle traps, X-wraps. So this is Apollo X-wrap right here. This is kind of one of my favorite. It's the bonita color, and we've caught a number of king mackerel in the last several years using the X-wrap. I mean, all season long you could try them, but certainly in the fall you're getting the fish schooling up. I've seen a number of fish caught on Johnnie Mercers using different spin baits like this. So now those you'll want to run a wire leader in front of.
Okay. Here's going to be my wrap up question then.
Sure.
So as far as the pier fishing goes, for someone heading out there in the fall to throw some artificials, we've covered baits, even talked about rods and, line and leader. What are some of the ancillary items, some of the other items that are just invaluable to the pier angler that the guy who's getting into pier fishing might not think ahead of to go, that's going to be handy to have out there, or that's going to be a problem not to have out there?
That's an excellent question. I'm glad you asked it, because the one thing that we often see, and it's never a problem because you have plenty of people out there that want to help, but a good drop net is probably first and foremost. We had a situation actually on Johnnie Mercer Pier today where a guy was fighting a tarpon and they didn't have a drop net. They ended up having to take the fish all the way to the beach. So that was good. The fish was caught, was released healthy and let go. But with a drop net, I think we would have definitely 100% assured that fish would have been put back in the water much quicker instead of working it all the way to the beach, to the sand. And that's typically what we see, whether we're talking about a flounder caught with artificial or, a 4 or 5 pound Spanish mackerel. You're not going to want to lift that fish, most likely with the soft mouth. It's going to rip out. But a lot of people show up and they don't have a good drop net. So that's first and foremost. I guess a second, would be if you wanted to have a gaff, a rope gaff. It's a little more involved with that, though. You need to know how to use the gaff. It's more of a commitment. You're not going to want to gaff every fish that you're bringing in. If it's only like a 2 pound, 3 pound Spanish, you probably want to go ahead and put a net under it. So first and foremost, I would say a drop net. You're going to want to have the tools of the trade. You're going to want to have pliers, a knife, cutters. So that's for sure. And with anything with all these toothy species, you're going to need redundancy. You're going to have a spool extra line for tying leaders on. You're not going to want to show up with only one lure. You're going to need multiple lures. So that's the main thing.
Bill Davis, that concludes my questions, man. I think this was a great podcast talking about fall artificials from the pier. Your backyard being Johnnie Mercer's Pier there in Wrightsville Beach. And I'm excited. I mean, this podcast has worked on me. I am now ready to go out and start with Gotcha Plug and then move on down the list.
Well, come out and visit us.
Yeah, man. And like I said in the setup, man, I am also just a big fan of the pier culture. So as long as you can promise me there'll be some colorful characters out there, then you'll be seeing me out there in the fall.
Yeah, everything from soup to nuts. You can't go wrong.
Deal. I'm in then. I will see you this fall. Bill, thank you again.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
All
Billy.
Right. Gary, what a show, man. I love it.
Was that guy talking your language, pier language?
Dude, yeah. I mean, yes. It was fun. Piers, foot fishing, whatever you call it. Whatever's not on a boat. That's what I like. So, man, he was a wealth of knowledge. I mean, when you have 40 years of dedicated to fishing, you know your stuff and know what you're doing. So
let's hope he's good after 40 years, right?
You're right.
Let's hope.
Let's hope.
Or he should take up golfing.
I don't know which one's worse, fishing or golfing for me, because I'm terrible at both of them, but whatever. That's why I co-host a saltwater fishing podcast. So I have all this library of knowledge so I can refer back to it. And Gary, my takeaway here is the Pompano catcher. I've already got it on my phone. I'm already on the website putting stuff into a cart. I always like to see a new rig, a new jig. And yeah, man, that thing looks pretty interesting. So not going to promise I'm going to use it, but I am going to buy one.
Yeah, and I see that thing working, as Bill said, working well from the surf as well. Man, I see, we have some popular surf fishing tournaments in the fall. I hope those guys are watching this and going, man, I can win some money on a Pompano and won a Fisherman's Post fall surf fishing tournament. Maybe I need a Pompano catcher.
Right.
I would certainly, if I were fishing my own tournaments, I would be on the phone ordering a Pompano catcher right now.
Yeah, man. And speaking of that tournament, I was going to mention that big fall tournament that you guys do, because when I was working at Fisherman's Post, I was in the sales role there. Man, I just remember being at those tournaments, and that was one of the funnest tournaments that was there. And I did a lot of them with you, and I always remember those people coming in, and they were just every single person was just fired up, ready to go, ready to catch some fish. And they were a different breed of people who honestly just love to have fun and go out there on the pier and do that and orchestrate it. And it's crazy when you go out there on a pier and you see all these different people, different personalities, but they're working this one unit to make sure everyone's having a good time. And then you get some knucklehead up there like me. I'm like, oh, can I slide in? Let me hook up on your stuff. But if you get the crew, they really know what they're doing, man. So it's really cool to see that, whatever. Anyway, you get me fired up about pier fishing now. And I don't even think I have a pier around here where I can go. So,
Yeah, man, it's a great. I mean, that's why I keep talking, man. I love the community aspect of both pier and surf fishing. I mean, you're lighting on it, man. It's awesome, and it is one of the things. Catching a Spanish mackerel, sure, man. I love catching Spanish mackerel. Catching a Spanish mackerel with a cast of characters out there just piping off, or whatever, making small talk.
Yep.
I am in. I am vested.
Even better.
It's what
man.
I enjoy. It's what I enjoy about Fisherman's Post fishing in general, as you know.
Yeah, man.
But let's wrap this up. We're getting too warm and fuzzy.
I know, right? Like, what are we talking about? Let's get back to fishing. We're dudes here. Let's smash our fist against the table. I just want to give Marine Warehouse another shout out, RA Hitch another shout out, Manscaped another shout out. Really appreciate these sponsors making the show possible. And once again, if you are a business owner and you like what we do here at Fisherman's Post on the podcast and you want to become a sponsor, feel free to reach out to me, Billy@fishermanspost.com, and we can start a conversation and see if you're a good fit for us, vice versa, all that fun stuff. But until then, go wet a line, have fun, and just remember to smile when you're fishing because you could be working. See you guys.
Thank you.